Hello, friends. Welcome to The Big Talk. We have talked about the power of story on this show many times, and that by sharing your story, you can change and even save someone's life. What about the storyteller? On this season, we're going to dive deep into how sharing our personal story can change and even save our life, and it absolutely ends up in transformation. I am super excited today to welcome our featured guest, Shelley Paxton. Shelley, are you ready to drop in?
I am, yes.
Shelley Paxton, as seen in Forbes, CBS, ABC, Fast Company, and Thrive Global, is an author, international speaker, and transformational coach. She can best be summed up as a burnout fighter and fire reigniter who is rebelling for rewriting the traditional script of success, starting with her new book, Soulbatical, a corporate rebel's guide to finding your best life. Shelley spent 26 years as a highly regarded marketing and advertising executive, stewarding some of the world's most iconic brands, including Harley-Davidson, Visa, McDonald's, and AOL, and walked away from it all to launch her own company, Soulbatical, and became the chief soul officer of her own life. Her mission is to liberate the souls of leaders and organizations by inspiring them to realize their greatest purpose and potential. Shelley, take a minute to fill us in on anything I missed and talk a little about you.
Oh, that was really thorough. Thank you for a beautiful introduction, Tricia. I appreciate it. The crux of it is I was one of those people who got to, the top of the mountain. I was working for Harley-Davidson, this sexy, iconic brand. And I was like, is this all there is? Why do I have all this success on the outside and yet feel this emptiness on the inside? And was kind of forced through a nightmare I was having to awaken to that, the fact that I wasn't living my truth. And the rest is the story I've been telling for the past 4 years. And it evolves on a daily, if not hourly basis.
When did you start, Shelley, noticing that you weren't living your truth? And did it come as a whisper or did it come as a brick?
I love that you said that because I always say first it's a whisper and then it's a shout and then it's a 2x4 to the solar plexus. And so, to be honest, there were lots of whispers. There were even some shouts. There was a lot of stuff I was ignoring. And I talk about this in the book where I was very clearly kind of going, I'm a warrior. I can get through this. And I wasn't paying attention and I wasn't listening deeply to some of those clues along the way. So the 2x4 was a nightmare. So I like to say it was the universe literally, reaching into my subconscious and ripping me out of my sleep. This was happening my final year at Harley. And I was there for 6.5 years. This is the final year. I'm a 45-year-old successful senior executive, and I'm waking up in the middle of the night, almost every night, curled up in the fetal position, crying my eyes out because I've seen the same image time and time again. So I got the 2x4. And when I finally interpreted what this was that I was seeing in my nightmare, I realized that what I was seeing was a proxy for my soul, and my soul was malnourished and neglected and longing for attention and love. And that was the beginning.
Then what happened after you acknowledged that image and really allowed yourself to live with it fully? What happened, Shelley?
Yeah, it became really, really clear to me that one, I was living someone else's dream. More specifically, I was living my dad's dream. And I suspect that a lot of people can relate to that. So I'm like, okay, here I am. I've had all this success. I've been feeding off of all this external validation and these accolades. And yet my own truth at the age of 45 is still deeply, suppressed inside of me. And so I made the commitment to invest in the possibility of my future self. And I said, what happens if I say, okay, I'm going to leave corporate America. I don't know if it's forever. I don't know if it's temporary, but I know I have a responsibility to listen deeply to my soul, to reconnect with my truth, and to understand what I felt to be a bigger calling and a deeper purpose. So I paved the way to do the scariest thing I've ever done, which is walk away from a really big job into total unknown.
This is so powerful because we talk about the art of public speaking, the power of voice, the importance of intention versus perfection when it comes to sharing your story. Also being ready to share the story, because when we share our personal stories and we have not healed from it, we are an open wound from a stage and we end up making everyone feel badly. At what point did you get to the other side of this transformation, and what was that transformation like, so that you could begin sharing your story via your book, via podcasts, via from stages, so that you could inspire other people to take the risk that you did in order to fully step into purpose?
Yeah, I love that question because it's been an evolution. So I mentioned, like, I'm coming up on my 4-year anniversary. I stepped over that threshold into the rest of my life in September of 2016. And so the transformation has been ongoing. At first, I was realizing I needed to do the inner work. I really needed to get quiet and get still and listen to that voice and start to come to grips with some of my demons, my own identity and how attached it was to these big brands and these big titles and a big paycheck and all of that stuff. So I spent the first, I would say, 8 months unwinding and unraveling all of that so I could get in touch with the fact, this question, actually, the question I asked myself was, what if the Shelley Paxton brand is the most iconic brand I could ever represent? And who is she? And what does that mean? And so I spent some dark days, if I'm honest, and this is the kind of mess of my story that I like to tell. I spent some dark days really digging deep into understanding that and rebuilding my sense of self and my sense of worth and identity from the inside out, not the outside in.
This is so important because we talk a lot for our listeners and our viewers about when you take a stage and you use the word live in your truth. That is part of the Big Talk podcast. Live your truth, be your authentic self, and drop in. When you live your truth and you are truly being honest from a stage, you will connect with people. I know that you've experienced time and time again, as I have, whether it's virtual or whether it's from a stage, somebody takes the stage and they're talking and you're on board with what they're saying, but you don't trust them. There's a disconnect. And that is always because they're not being authentic. They're not speaking their truth. They're telling you what they think you want to know, or they're putting on airs in order to become impressive as a speaker. How did you get to a point in your book, Shelley, and when you're speaking, that you are really allowing yourself to be that authentic, truthful, vulnerable self?
Yeah, this was a big pivot for me because I realized that I lived so much of my life, those 26 years in the corporate world working for sexy brands, I lived that life with kind of the Instagram filter on that life, if you will, right? It was like, it looked so sexy from the outside. And in a lot of ways, it absolutely was. I have zero regrets. And yet I've now realized, and I made a commitment to say, we don't talk enough about what's going on the inside. And so that messiness of, well, no one really knew what I was experiencing that last year at Harley, and even times before that. I had some mental health challenges. I had a suicide attempt. I had all these things that I just glossed over because I was almost ashamed. I didn't want people to know that this is what I experienced. And now I realize, oh, that's the real connection. That's the power, as you say. I love Sue Monk Kidd has a quote, the deeper we go, what does she say? Actually, I wrote this down. The deeper we go into our own journey, the more likely we are to hit the universal. And I think that's exactly what you're saying. And that's what I've experienced, that connection. Like, my people are coming to me. And so my mission in writing the book was absolutely to share the messiness, to share what was going on inside that no one knew about, because I knew that was the way to connect with others. And my commitment was, I'm going to give you the dark and the light. I'm going to share with you the messiness, and I'm going to put my arm around you and say, I got you, because that's what I wish somebody would have been there to do when I walked away.
If you were to speak directly to the person who is meant to hear this podcast or to watch this YouTube video today, what would you say to them, Shelley, about where they are in the moment where it's the most painful? Tell us what you would share with them today.
Two things come to mind as you say that. One, I'm a big believer, especially having gone on this journey myself, that your pain is your purpose. So sinking into that and really saying, what is the gift in this? And I think it goes back to that Sue Monk Kid quote, because that pain is a connection point. And the willingness to move through that pain and be vulnerable about that journey is the deep connection to what others are experiencing. And, you know, the other piece is, I believe that our mess is our message. I really do. I had no idea when I went on this deeply personal journey starting 4 years ago that I would be sitting here today having this conversation. I was committed to just putting one foot in front of the other, to taking tiny steps until people started to notice and ask questions and wondered how they could live a similar life of authenticity and courage and purpose. And so little bit by little bit, I started sharing more and sharing more. And then in the book, I was like, I'm just opening the kimono. So yeah, I would encourage everyone to share your story and get vulnerable, because man, I've had some of the most beautiful conversations with people who've read my book, who've seen me talk, and what they say. And Tricia, this goes back to your earlier point. They say, I feel your energy. I feel your authenticity and presence. And to me, there's no higher compliment.
That is so true. That's incredible. And we are virtual, obviously, because we are in a global pandemic. And I'd love to know, I feel my speakers through the screen. I just produced a virtual speaker showcase from the Big Talk Academy. I also feel your energy through the screen. I would love to know how you can share with our listeners how you show up authentically when it's virtual.
Yeah, the virtual thing has been an interesting transition, I think, for all of us, right? Because I'm used to walking into a space with live people, feeling the energy of the audience, hearing the buzz, feeling the buzz in my body. And it's a different experience to, do what you and I are doing now, or to, do these virtual speaking opportunities where I'm talking to hundreds of people, and I can't scroll through all the screens, and I can't see or hear or necessarily feel all the people. So one of the things I've been doing that helps me feel like there's kind of reciprocity of energy is to engage the audience. So most of my speaking has been through Zoom. I would imagine that's similar for a lot of us. And I've realized very quickly that engagement through chat, through bringing people in, is the way to create that energy. And so I'm already in a place where I share my energy. I've learned how to, like, as I'm talking to you right now, I'm looking into my camera because I know that's the way to connect with you one-on-one. I can also kind of sit back and fill the space like this, right? It's kind of the three circles. Isn't it Patsy Rodenberg who talks about the three circles? And so I can fill the space for a group of hundreds who I'm talking to, and then I can pick one person and I can lean in and have that deeper, more intimate connection and presence. And so I've been playing with that, but there's nothing better than getting the audience involved. And then it's building that skill of how you kind of move in and out and around the space depending upon what you're communicating and how many people you're engaging with, one-on-one or one-to-many.
This is so fantastic. And for those of you who are only listening to this on the podcast, be sure to hop over to the YouTube channel and watch this episode, because Shelley demonstrated what she was talking about so beautifully. I want to talk a little bit more too about how you're 4 years into your journey, you know your purpose, and we're in a global pandemic. Do you feel like this timing is divine for you?
1000%. And I'm so excited that you brought that up, because there were a couple of days, as a first-time author, my book comes out in January of 2020, and 2 months later, the world shuts down and all of my plans, sort of go poof in smoke. And so I had a couple days where I was like, maybe a little woe is me. And then I woke up one morning, I'm like, this is a gift. Because the world is slowing down. The world is experiencing what I experienced early on in my journey. We have to get out of the busyness, out of the shoulding all over ourselves, all of that, and really slow down and get still and get quiet. And I think this whole experience, especially during lockdown, was a way for us, it made really clear for all of us what really matters in our lives. And we got really clear on some of the stuff that we didn't really need to be doing anymore. What do we want to start pruning out of our lives? And what do we want to start creating more space for in the new normal, or whatever you want to call it? So I've been doing a lot of speaking. At first I kind of very cheekily said quarantine or sabbatical. Because that was kind of my view on how people might be experiencing this. And it was a way for me to say, yeah, it's okay for all of us to be feeling all of the feels. This is scary, and there's a lot of tragedy and loss. And at the same time, it's okay for us to sink in. And maybe this is the time for us to get still and ask some pretty provocative questions. And so that was fun to get to tee up. And I still feel incredibly on purpose. I'm on a mission to liberate 1 billion souls. And the fact that I get to have these conversations every single day is just like, yeah, it feels very magical.
Amazing. I'm so excited that you are going to liberate 1 billion souls. I'm super excited to know that.
Thank
I
you.
also want you to talk briefly about, Shelley, when someone goes through a transformation like you, when someone begins to tell their story in order to serve others and in order to, they unintentionally transform themselves by going through it and by sharing it. Let's say they're on the other side and you're whole. Let's say you're on the other side and you're in purpose. How does one continue to share the story with the same impact after having shared it a lot?
Ooh, I haven't even thought about that. So the first thing that comes to me is I show up as myself every day. So I made a commitment when I first started doing more and more publicity, having more and more conversations around my book and around my message, that I was going to show up every day like I was on the Today Show. And I was also, I am also going to show up in the moment, being very present to whatever happens in that moment. And what I love about that is my story comes out a different way every time. This conversation that you and I are having right now, I've never had this exact conversation before. You're able to pull out, I just love this angle, right? I haven't talked about it, my journey, from this particular angle before. So that's what gets me jazzed. I show up and I'm like, live in the present moment and see what comes out and allow it to flow through me. And then it never feels boring or repetitive.
This is such great information for our listeners and our viewers. It's not boring and it's not repetitive, because it may, although be the same story, you're experiencing it, you're sharing it, you're telling the story in a new way, based on the audience, based on the person interviewing you. And that is so, so valuable. I share with you that I did an interview, I think last year, and 9/11 was over 20 years ago. And I began to tell my story and I got verklempt, was not expecting that because I've told that story a lot. So being able to show up and see what happens and be in the moment. So for anyone who has transformed by sharing your story, please know that when you share it over and over again, we can feel when you're sharing it for the service of others rather than just sharing it because you know that people need to hear it. It really needs to be in service of others and to be in that present moment. I love that.
Ooh, in service of others. That's how I wake up every day, in profound service of this mission and of others. And that feels, you're right, that feels good. And it takes a different shape and form every day. And it feels very personalized.
Shelley, what would you share with our listeners or our viewers who are feeling stuck right now? What would you advise them to do today in this very moment?
Get still. Get very still. And I know I've said that a few times and I cannot emphasize it enough. I think so often, they're probably not listening deeply enough to the whispers inside. We always have the answers inside. And I still struggle with this, just so everyone knows I'm incredibly human. I remind myself of this every day, but really give yourself a gift of 10 minutes a day of getting still and listening deeply and really understanding what's the next tiny step I can take. What's one thing that I can do based on what I'm hearing? Because our story is in our soul. And I think we try to resolve so much in our heads. We're trying to craft things up here, and there's so many stories running on a bully loop in our heads. And really the narrative is in our soul. And we will understand more and more of it as we get quiet. And to me, that's the biggest gift that we can give ourselves. And then I guess the second piece to that is, I always say every badass accomplishment is a series of tiny steps. So you can look at where I am 4 years later, man, it is nothing more than a series of tiny steps of like one step forward, and then the universe would deliver. We can't even imagine the magic that can be created when we lean into that little voice.
I love this, and I want you to unpack just a little bit more. You hear the whisper. What about all the people who ignore it?
Oh man, well, I was one of those people. So the first thing I'll say is, I feel you. My sisters and my brothers, I feel you. And listen and feel for the signs, right? We know when we're ignoring it. My favorite coaching question that I'll share with all of you is, what are you pretending not to know?
Oh, that's so good. We are all pretending not to know something. I love that, Shelley.
Every day I'm still pretending not to know things, right? Like this is forever a journey. There isn't a destination. So ask yourself that question. Start there. And I think that helps to kind of dig a little bit deeper. The other one that I'll offer up to everyone who's watching or listening is, what would change in your life right now if you were living 100% true to you?
I encourage everyone to answer that question fully, because when you fully step into your purpose and you share your story, you will transform. And by being transformed, you will be able to serve more people.
Yeah, this has changed my life. I mean, and getting vulnerable, I realize, and I talk very openly. I think this is another suggestion I would have for everyone. The more openly you share, the more you give others permission to share their story. And I've found this through my social media channels, that the more I say, you know what, guys, I'll go first. Let me share. I did this yesterday. I have a coffee mug that says, let that shit go. And that coffee mug almost leapt into my hands yesterday morning out of the cupboard. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. What's going on? And I realized that I have this story around social media in my head, that it is hard and that I suck at it. And I was like, wait a second, let go of that. What does it look like? I talked a little bit about why I feel that way. And then I talked about my intention to show up more consistently, more authentically and vulnerably, and make it, do it with ease and joy and soul. And so I told my story first, and I said, what do you need to let go? So that's typically how I do it, to invite people in and also know that I'm taking a hefty dose of my own medicine.
So powerful. So be still, write down what you know.
What you're pretending not to know.
To know exactly, and go first. This is so awesome. Shelley, I want to thank you for being a featured guest today on The Big Talk. Where can our viewers and listeners get in touch with you?
This has been such an honor. I love this. It's like it's all new all over again. So thank you, Tricia. Let's see, soulbatical.com, and Soulbatical is SOULBBATICAL. So I spell it kind of funny, 2 B's and 1 T. Instagram is my playground, at Soulbatical on Instagram, and Shelley Paxton on LinkedIn. If you want to, connect that way and see a little bit more of my experience. Those are probably the 3 best ways. And you can buy my book anywhere. Amazon, Black-owned bookstores, wherever you get your favorite books, you can find it there as well.
Amazing. And we'll put all of this in the show notes for everyone. Thanks again for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed The Big Talk. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Please tune into the next episode. And remember, live your truth, be your authentic self, and drop in. I hope that you will start sharing your powerful story today, and be sure to subscribe and click on that notification bell so that you get access to my newest and latest videos. And I really appreciate that you are here and will always respond to the comments. Big love.